Want entertainment designed just for you? Then check out customizable streaming TV from Xfinity. It makes your life simple, easy, awesome.
Xfinity gives you customizable streaming TV options. Enjoy the most free shows anywhere on any device, and even access your streaming apps right on your TV with X1. Go to Xfinity.com, call 1-800-XFINITY, or visit a store today to learn more. Restrictions apply.
Aloha, everyone, and welcome to Aquarian Radio at aquarianradio.com. I'm your host, Janet Carol Lesson, with my co-hosts, Karen Christine Patrick and Reverend John Polk. And we're getting Experiencers Network. We're at the Experiencers Network. If you're on the chat, you have to mute your button down there on the right-hand side, because we'll get feedback. So very good. So this is an episode of Experiencers Network, and we have a very special guest and experiencer, Keith Andrews. And Karen is going to read the next part and tell us a little bit more about who Keith is and why we invited him on the show today. Karen, are you there? John, are
Hello.
you there?
I'm here.
Oh, there she is.
I was working on muting my computer, too. It popped up. I love technology. It's always full of surprises. But, yeah, I'm super excited to have Keith here today. I'm looking forward to his story. Keith, and here's our introduction. Keith is an experiencer and was present at the Experiencer's Speak Conference in August in Portland, Maine, and I was a witness to the Blue Being Visitation, where beings who looked perhaps like human hybrids came to see Travis Walton speak. He was the keynote speaker there, and these beings were witnessed by 20 other people at the conference, including our co-host here today, John Polk. And I guess I heard a rumor Keith might have the only picture of the beings from his camera, so we're going to learn more about that tonight.
Let me mute my mic. Okay, there we go. Continue. John, can you
All right.
take
Go
over?
ahead, John Polk.
Okay,
you pick
go
it
ahead.
up from there.
All right, Keith Andrews' bio. So when making initial contact with anyone, I look for the integrity in their hearts with which they operate. I don't care what race or religion, age, or gender they are, as long as they treat others with respect. It is a well-known fact that all people are not going to always get along, but Keith is a firm believer that as thinking individuals, we all have the ability to at least treat others the way we would like to be treated. Born with his abilities, Keith quickly found himself surrounded by people seeking guidance in their day-to-day lives. By giving direct answers, Keith assisted many people with issues ranging from relationships through career choices, and including many unexplained experiences bring peace and or closure to people of all ages. Now, over the years, I'm going to be reading as if I'm Keith now, I have rediscovered many tools with which to work and have developed and taught many courses in tarot reading and in meditation. As a result, I am now a highly sought-after intercontinental psychic reading by phone, mail, radio, and in person. When I'm not doing readings, I'm writing about and or researching my own skills and personal abilities. I'm currently based in the, say this wrong, Okanagan, British Columbia, Canada, where I continue to hone my skills working with police as well as many charities, and I do keep my private life my own while writing on various topics and fulfilling public speaking engagements and lectures as time allows. From Keith's website, www.thecelestialprophet.com, due to his seemingly unlimited extreme knowledge in virtually any subject area, his incredible gift to use energy for healing purposes, and his direct link between the spiritual and physical realms, mediumship, Keith was given the name the Celestial Prophet by a large group of traveling psychics in 2002. Keith's readings are in truth specialized advisory and or counseling sessions, which turn into amazing journeys full of awe-inspiring experiences and lots of aha moments, generosity, very caring, and are deeply spiritual. With his free-flowing honesty, shocking accuracy, and being to the point, many crucial things will come up that require Keith to become a skilled counselor to first stabilize you, then explain the tools you require while encouraging you to make the best decisions for your life.
And with that, welcome to our show, Keith Andrews.
Well, thank you very much for having me here. I'm here.
We're
Can you hear me?
very happy to have. Yes, we can hear you. We're very happy to have you on our show today. So for the first part of the show, we're going to, Karen and John and I are going to ask you questions and focus on you. So Keith is on in the hot seat, or the warm seat. And then the second half of the show, and however it flows naturally, but we'll do a little bit of a discussion panel with all four of us sharing around the topics that we're going to uncover in the first part of the show. So with that being said, I know John prepared a lot of wonderful questions. Now, Karen, you and I aren't limited to John's questions, and John, you're not limited to your questions. So we, in the course of the interview, think of something else to ask or discuss. You're more than welcome to do that. But let's start with John Polk, who set up all these wonderful questions. Take it away, John.
Okay, if we're going to focus on Keith first, then I'll ask some of the questions more towards the bottom of my talking points and questions. So if you have the chance, you definitely want to read up on Keith's story. It's absolutely fascinating. His talking points are really out of the world. But to preface, I met Keith at the Experiencer Speak 3 conference, which was last year. And I was sitting with Ray Hernandez of Dr. Edgar Mitchell's Free, the Foundation for Research and Extraterrestrial Encounters. And he and Ray already knew each other. And we're sitting down for breakfast, and we start talking. And one of the first things that Keith talked about is that he has open dialogue with at least 20 different species of ETs. And so a couple of my first questions for you, Keith. How many different ETs are you receiving downloads from? And what are their species names, and what planets or dimensions do they originate from?
Well, let's eliminate the first part of the problem. We're not actually dealing with a dimensional problem, and this may be an issue of terminology. You're certainly looking at different races that vibrate at different speeds and therefore are harder to see. But the reality of it is, when you're dealing with anything existing in this space, in three-dimensional space, they're three-dimensional beings. Okay, it's just some of them, cellularly speaking, vibrate faster and therefore are harder to see. Now, in answer to the original question, though, roughly speaking, I think at last count it was something in the neighborhood of 25 or more different races that I've been in contact with. But do understand, it's not like I talk to every one of these races every day by any stretch. Okay. The biggest issue that I've found, I deal with, let me think here for just half a second, I think 6 different reptilian races, like distinctly different. There are three different ones that actually evolved on Earth. So I tend to separate the races into both off-world and ancient races. Off-world, as it would suggest, don't come from here. And the ancient races are the ones that actually evolved on Earth. Now, there are 4 different types of elementals I've dealt with. Of course, the fairy folk that many people hear about, i.e. your elves, your leprechauns, your sprites, they're quite real. Then, of course, you've got the ones that people know about, such as your Arcturians, your Nordics, the Greys, and much as the Greys come in multiple colors, like I think there's something in the neighborhood of 15 different colored Greys that I've heard of. It's kind of like humans. They're different colors, but they're still the same entity, if you will. And, of course, the important Pleiadians, the Shadow Walkers, the Lycans, the Water, which are, quite frankly, a bipedal. They are a sentient sort of ape. Bigfoot I've dealt with, but Bigfoot, simply put, is Gigantopithecus. It's not, Bigfoot is not a interdimensional species by any stretch from what I've seen. Okay, and do understand, when we're talking about elementals, we are talking about beings that are composed of fire, water, earth, and then of course you've got the amoebic, the insect type. Okay, i.e. the mantis, ants, and spiders. And I refer to them that way because they do resemble them. Now, in answer to where they come from, well, that's as varied as it can get.
Wow.
If
okay, that's great.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that's a very good start. I have 20 questions already. Yeah, let me know when you're finished with that answer, because I think I'll go next, and then I'll pass the baton to Karen. But go ahead and finish what you're saying, but that's a great start. I have met many of these species as well, but I like how you're describing them.
Well, when you're dealing with the biggest issue I find, when you hear about so many people talking about these off-worlders are here to wipe out the planet, they're here to take it over. The thing you got to understand is these races, if they wanted to take it over, they are not going to infiltrate the government and screw up human politics. Mankind is doing that quite well. Okay. The reptilians, the reason, as near as I can figure, people are combining, that I'm aware of, at least 5 different races of reptilian and calling it one. Okay. The big problem with that, of course, is that people are looking at it and going, well, if they're reptilian, they're here to kill us, they're here to eat us. Well, sad to say, there is one race of reptilians that I absolutely agree, given their choice, human is on the menu. These are not the average, everyday, run-of-the-mill alien that you run into. And besides that, they've got their own civil war going on with that particular race. That's the 4.5 to 5.5 foot raptor-like race that I grew up knowing as Tekluk. And they did originally come here from a very long distance, and they were planning on stripping the planet. They needed the minerals to protect their own planet from another race coming in their area that won't get here for some time. Now,
can I ask you a question on the raptors that you call
absolutely.
Catholic? Okay. I've interviewed Joanne Richards, whose husband, Mark Richards, is in prison for life. He's been framed, and we're trying to get him out. But he says that he grew up interacting with the raptors, who were part of a annual meeting they had with many different intergalactic species. Often they took place on large estates, like in the UK, at castles and that type of thing. And his father was a diplomat. And then the raptors, at the Dulce incident, it was the raptors that came in and helped the humans free a lot of the slaves that were being held prisoner and modified genetically and used as sex slaves, and part of them were used as food, like a delicacy for other species. Right. Now, they called those the raptor beings, and they apparently were allies of the humans. But you're saying the raptor beings that you knew were had us on their menu. Is that correct? Am I getting that correct?
Well, only sort of. You remember me mentioning that the raptors have a civil war going on?
Okay, so the raptors have a civil war. Uh-huh.
The people that this chap that you just mentioned, and pardon me for missing his name there, but the raptors he dealt with, that was whom?
Mark Richards.
Mark. Yeah, Mark clearly was dealing with the raptors, with the text that had gone against the norm, if you will, and decided to help humans. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, quite frankly, he, for lack of a better way of putting it, he lucked out. But yeah, there are both sides of the coin with the text, with the raptors. There are both there's both the ones that are trying to help and the ones that are causing a problem.
Okay.
You understand?
I'm sure we have a lot more. We're going to go into this. Yes. Karen, do you have any questions on the raptors or the? Let's break it down into the different types, I guess. So there's the insectoids, which include the mantis. We have the elementals. We have the reptilians. Seem to be one of the major mysteries. Karen, do you have any reptilian-related questions or comments?
Not reptilians, but the spider people. You talked about the spider people. I have one insectoid contact of significance, and the spider people came in to me telepathically in visions and dreams and whatnot when my partner and I research on the moon. Apparently they're on the moon, and they are the ones we were interacting with are human spider hybrid. Spider-Man, Spider-Woman. They might be quite old in our indigenous stories of the spider grandmother and the spider grandfather in the Cherokee legends. But they basically they work very well on the moon because a spider can stick to anything. They're not really too bothered by gravitational issues. It's working on Luna base. And they're one particular. We have imagery. We're working with embedded imagery and NASA photographs. We have one photograph where there's basically depicting a spider funeral. It was fascinating. There was a deceased person, and the spiders were wearing black. The more humanoid they are, they wear clothing. They look kind of Victorian, and they were desiccating the body. They were draining the fluids out of the body and wrapping it with webs and very lovingly trying to get it ready for burial. I mean, they're very, very interesting, and they interact with humans on Luna base. And the other interaction I had was an insectoid. This is just telepathic. He's on his mothership, not near us, and that I've had a lot of telepathic interaction with. And I've sometimes seen him through technology, like I'm talking through some kind of Star Trek-y kind of panel. Or also I've seen him, I can POV through his eyes, and we can exchange looking through each other's eyes. So I've seen his planet. And he liked to look at Earth because on their planet they don't have standing water like we do on the surface. He thinks that's really cool. That's unusual for a planet. Usually they're icy or dry or deserty or something like that. So I'm resonating a lot with what you're saying, Keith, with all these different types of beings, and they come up archetypally in our legends, our old ancient legends. This is not a new thing that humanity's been involved and connected, and I was really fascinated with your story about the races that evolved here that are reptilian. I have one contact with a being who calls himself Rhea, or more like growls in the back of their throat. Rhea, I can't do it well. And, they are children of Gaia, the same as we are. They went off. This group went off in motherships. For some reason, some of them came back, and are visiting us. So you're hitting it right on the money, Keith. I'm fascinated that you have those contacts too, and so many, so you get a broad spectrum of who they are, what they're up to. So awesome. If you can speak to that.
For Keith?
Yeah, the spider people. I want to know more about the spider people. I got a good feeling about them.
Well, my first interaction with them was, to say the least, less than amicable. Because for me, they, quite frankly, ended up breaking my arm simply trying to figure out how far it would bend. And let's face it, as a child in arms, which is when I first ran into them, that was not what we call a pleasant run. They are, you are right, they can hang on to pretty much anything. The human hybrids, the whole hybridization program is actually spearheaded by the Greys. Okay, they're the ones that actually know how to merge humans with the other races. Okay, and with the spiders, frankly, it's kind of fascinating to watch them because it really depends on the day. They've only got 2 legs that are actually full feet.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
The other 6 are what would amount to kind of a cross between your hands and your feet, because they're more fully prehensile, if you will, albeit only 3-fingered. Well, 2 fingers and a thumb, I guess, is the best way to put it. But the other 6 legs, and I'm talking on the spiders themselves, not on the hybrids, they're able to be used as either feet or hands, much like, if you will, what a chimpanzee would work like.
Makes sense. Could you talk about the hybrid ones? Because the imagery that we're getting, the vision information, they can vary from being closer to being spidery or more humanoid, and even with less appendages. That was the information we've been getting.
Yeah, they aim for, when they're trying to, if you will, program the coding for it to make a hybrid, and they're very much a genetic construct. It's very easy to get them to look relatively human, but you will find the eyes are invariably a mess. Like the eyes just plain do. This is one of the reasons why they literally keep their eyes shaded, is because when you're looking at a human, even a human-like face, where the eyes are built in so many pieces, it's really hard to organize. It's hard for humans to accept the appearance.
Yeah.
Okay. Most of the hybrids that you'll run into are down to the 2 arms, but they do have a tendency of thinking slower than what the actual arachnids think, because they've had to be slowed down in order to only try and use the 2 arms. Because you got to remember, arachnids, the machinery that the actual arachnids use, humans are not capable of using because they're not built properly. Okay, it's kind of like with a standard, if you're trying to drive a standard car, you usually need 2 arms to do it. You're not going to be able to drive a standard car, on Earth, if you've only got your left arm, unless you happen to be in England.
Yeah, that was the feeling I got. Was the more spidery-oriented ones were utilized for maintenance and construction of constructs. They, because of course they got built-in ability to build cable, and they also, just like a spider can spin out a web, but also they are able to stick upside down and hang on to things, and their other 2 hands can do stuff. And the more humanoid ones are less capable because, of course, they're like we are. We would have more difficulty in those environments.
Absolutely. Now, the one advantage that the hybrids have is they do know which cables to walk on.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And in a low gravity environment where we have our astronauts bouncing around and practically falling over in spacesuits, this is not a problem for them in lower gravity environments because they just stick.
Well, exactly. Given the right material anyway, and when they can't stick, they still have more hands to hang on with.
That's great. I'm so glad you're giving that information. We'll have to talk further because we've had communication with them, and they're very much wanting to be known to us, and they're very excited when anyone is telepathically interested in them. They get very excited about that.
Well, let's face it, it's a little hard to talk to them verbally because the way they speak is done, from a human standpoint, from the base of the throat. It is not done from the top.
I had that problem trying to voice channel a reptilian thing. It's very growly, so I just stick with imagery and trying to communicate concepts instead of language. But I have tried to voice channel a few, and it's pretty tough because you're right. It's way down in the base of the throat. There's a few human languages that do that, but we're generally way up at the top, like you said, exactly. Amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. John, do you have any, let's kind of exhaust the spider thing. If you don't have a question on or comment on the spider, then pass to the next person. We'll go around with the species, different species. Or did you have anything to ask about the reptilians before we move past them as well? Over to you, John.
Okay, if we're going to stick with reptilians for now, and Keith, correct me if I mispronounce this. The Srzacians?
Well, you're close.
Okay, how do you pronounce that correctly?
It's actually Srzacian.
Srzacians. Okay, it's not a long A, Srzacians. So going back to when you were very young, you had some encounters with 7.5 to 8.5 foot tall armored reptilians. Can you tell us something about that?
Well, you're lucky in this case. I used to have to literally say no because it triggered PTS to a rather extreme degree.
Oh, and that's another question, but I'll ask you that later.
Yeah, that's a whole long story. Basically, what it boiled down to is when I was young, right, and we're talking a year and a half, 2 years old is when I first ran into them. But basically, I was in an underground complex, and in the MyLab complexes. Now, to me, all I thought it was, frankly, was a hospital. Turns out it was a school. But there was a whole mix of human children in there, human technicians, medical technicians, and these huge 7.5 to 8.5 foot reptilian technicians. Now, when you take a look at these things, you got to remember when they had to bring in their own keyboard interfaces because they've got the strength that they try typing on a keyboard, they punch holes in the bottom of it. Mm-hmm. Okay. At 5 years old, and this is going to sound extremely science fiction, but so be it. At 5 years old, I was murdered. I was actually, the human technicians, for their own reasons, injected me with something that was designed to actually terminate me permanently. When that happened, a Srzacian female came out of the corner of a room out of what looked like a utility cabinet, crossed the room, and in the process of picking me off the gurney that I was strapped to, she, with one arm, like with one hand, she cut the nylon bindings and lifted me up all at the same time. With her other arm, with her other claw, she quite literally tore the chest plate off of the first technician she came to. Now, bear in mind, he was not wearing armor, so we are talking this man did not live. The 4 technicians that were in the room, she killed on the way out of the room. Dropped down on all three, on essentially 3 feet, because she was holding me with the second arm, and she ran. She bolted, hit the door hard enough to tear it off its hinges, and into the hallway. Any humans that got out of the way, she ignored. But the ones that were in the way, she literally would pick them up and fire them out of the way hard enough they were cracking the concrete. Now, the Sirzazians that were in the hall would step back out of the way, and she just totally ignored them. In one case that I remember, there was a human technician behind one of the Sirzazian technicians that backed up. He ended up getting crushed in the process. The human did. This female took me down a real short corridor, and that's why she ended up running on all three, through a number of different turns and what have you, and she placed me in a red light. There was not a table, but I didn't fall. There were two other Sirzazian technicians right there that went to work to try and put my system back together. Now, all of this is taking place during extreme pain. Like, it felt like my whole body was on fire. Somewhere in the middle of that, I ended up passing out. Okay, passing out, dying. My guess is dying works, considering I woke up in the morgue. Now, my coming out of the morgue has been both confirmed and denied by the people involved. Okay, and so from that standpoint, when I come out of when I walked out, because I woke up and I thought I was in a barracks. In all fairness, I had a white sheet over top of me, and of course, growing up on a military base, it was normal in a bright room. You pull your blanket over your head. So I pushed the blanket out of the way, sat up, and there were 30 or 40 different people laying on these beds. Now, this was in 1968. So I hopped off the bed, and the first thing that crossed my mind was that it was an awful long way to the floor. So I hit the floor, and I looked, and here's a human technician laying there. And my first thought was, why didn't he grab one of the beds? There's 8 or 10 of them left. And for that matter, why didn't he take his coat off? So I ignored it, walked over. I saw a door to leave, so I pushed it was a two-way swinging door, looked to the left, and decided I didn't want to go that way. So I looked to the right, and there was a ramp there. And I walked up the ramp, pushed the door open, and here's this airman this military chap sitting on a chair, and he pulled his feet in, and he's looking at me, and I went wandering past him. Blonde lady leaned out of what appeared to be a glass enclosed room, and she was looking after me, watching me leave. And of course, I'm dressed in one of these blue hospital gown type things. Walked into the lobby, and here's my mom and my dad in each other's arms, and they're in tears. And here's the doctor going, "I'm sorry, we lost him." And of course, being 5 years old, I looked at my dad and I went, "Who'd you lose?"
Whoa.
And I realize that sounds extremely like an extreme case of science fiction. The problem is it's been confirmed to not only me but to other people as well.
So can we back up a little bit, because I missed a couple things. First of all, this Sirzazian, what did it look like again? Can you describe what Sirzazian looks like?
They're 7.5. The adults are 7.5 to 8.5 feet tall. They're armored. They have they grow their own armor. There is a colored band around their throat that is used for communication in really, really intense negative weather where sound just won't travel. They've only got 3 fingers. 3 fingers and a thumb, 3 toes, and what would amount to a dew claw. Okay, and their talons are strong enough. Their strength is strong enough that they will punch holes in concrete when they're running. Okay, They
these
actually
are like raptor type beings, or
No.
Are they more?
They are.
Do they walk on all fours, or do they walk on twos?
They walk on two. They are very military, very respect, very honor bound. On the whole, they run on two. They stand on two. They run on two. The only time that they run on 3 or 4, if you will, is when they're trying to get down a chute that they have to move in a hurry. They're still capable of running on 4. They just don't tend to.
Do they have a tail?
The bigger ones do. They grow it. The bigger ones grow the tail as a balance point because the smaller ones don't require it. You know, if you've got a light framed Strazazian, they won't have a tail because they don't require it to keep them balanced.
Okay, thank you. Now, I want to go back even further. So you said that you've been having, when did contact start for you, and what species, and where were you raised where this was happening also? Where were you living? So what contact and with whom?
Okay, where I was living.
Start?
I was actually born in Richmond, BC, which is just out of BC, Canada, which is just outside of Vancouver. It's a suburb of Vancouver, Canada. Okay. And my dad was military, so of course there was a base there called the Sea Base. In June of '64, that base was closed, and we were moved to Comox, BC, which is about the middle of the east coast of Vancouver Island.
And you were born
basically
in what year
18
again?
miles to. Try that again?
What year were you born?
1963.
When were you born? Okay, 1963. So you were just a year old when that closed.
Well, when I had my first encounter, I was actually the day I was born.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, that's okay. So do you want to start at the beginning, or do you want to start at a critical incident? Where do you want to start?
Well, that's where I run into the problem. The day I was born, I flatlined. Okay, I was born mottled green and black. I remember my parents, quite frankly, recoiling from my appearance because I was such an odd color. I was politely put in, stating it politely, I was put in an incubator and, hooked up to a number of different IVs and what have you. And, well, frankly, I didn't appreciate it much, so I left. I consciously got out of my body, as in astral travel, pulled the energy out of the body, and I went to go home. Okay. And on that journey, I ran into the Council of 12. They stopped me from going home and said, no, you have a major job to do. You are not going home. You're going back to the body that you agreed to. And my immediate response was, I did not agree to that kind of abuse. So we had a conversation, we'll call it that, and I ended up getting told I had to go back. Well, in the middle of that, the thing I discovered really early was don't astral travel when you're hooked up to monitors in ICU. Because, frankly, they will, they get really testy, really agitated. Okay. And they tend to do all sorts of things that really annoy you. So I came back, okay, and told them, and basically ended up, the day I got back into my body, at that point I was now able to see the deceased spirit, see what you call mediumship. Okay, watching the people that have passed away walk around, walk through walls, and knowing full well what they were doing there, why they were doing what they were. Okay, that's where my work, or where my connection to the spiritual world started. Now, if you really want to look at where my connection to the Strazazian started, frankly, we have to go back a lifetime. But this lifetime, it was when my first real solid interaction with them was when I was, well, I guess I'd be probably 2, maybe a year and a half when I first got taken to this what turned out to be a school. I thought it was a hospital, but turned out to be a school. And by the time I was 4, I was sitting down in a classroom full of different sigils, different panels, different sheets of paper, reworking re-entry trajectories for different atmospheric densities using transtemporal configurations. Basically, writing in 3 different time frames at the same time in order to make something happen. Okay.
Wow. Uh-huh.
As my abilities developed, as near as I understand it from what I've been told, my abilities were getting too far ahead, and they quite literally tried to stop it. And the Srozosians didn't exactly, shall we say, approve. Now whether they were trying to stop, whether they were trying to slow it down, slow the development of the psychic abilities down, or whether they were trying to stop it because of fear, I'm not 100% certain. Okay. But what I do know is that it ended up resulting in dealing with. It ended up with the humans. The humans were the ones that were trying to stop the development. The Srozosians had brought technology and medical information and insight from that standpoint to the human government with the idea of helping the human race. The government broke every contract that was signed and tried turning this stuff into weaponry. So, of course, and this is where the MyLab, some of the tortures, some of the horrendous acts that I saw humans perpetrating on their own kids, their own human children, was just absolutely, it's not something they can put in movies. Take the worst nightmare you can possibly think of, and it frankly pales by comparison in all likelihood. But it was the humans doing that to their own. The Srozosians, because they couldn't control the way the humans were doing it, when the humans tried to terminate me, well, they succeeded in a way, that's when the Srozosians took a direct interference. And quite frankly, they were the ones responsible for my survival.
So why were they trying to kill you?
As near as I can figure.
Logic?
Well, there's a very simple logic. My senses were climbing so fast, and my abilities were climbing so fast, they couldn't control them. And you got to remember, the one thing about the MyLab procedure is they're trying to build weapons they can control. Okay, if you're going to build a biological weapon, it's a good idea to have it in your control. Well, I wasn't controllable. Okay. The sad part of it is because there was a glitch in my system when I was 20 months old. There was a glitch in my system when I was 20 years old, or 20 months old, where I took a fever of 108.4 that flash fried my hypothalamus and created a massive change in the way my brain is actually built, the way it functions. Now, it was admitted that the humans brought in a human mystic to try and shut down my higher senses. Okay, and when I asked the people involved if they were trying to slow it down or if they were trying to kill it, the ability, the answer I got was they were trying to kill it. Okay, and it just didn't work out that way. And when they couldn't kill it, now what I don't know is if they were trying to kill just the shall we say, the nasty, vindictive, uncooperative side to make, if you will, a passively controllable weapon. I don't know. What I do know is it didn't work, and the net result was they tried terminating my entire body. Before I was 10, I had clinically flatlined 4 times. Okay. The basic joke is it's not hard to kill me, it's just hard to keep me that way.
I've heard that before, actually. So they tried to kill you. You weren't exactly what they were looking for, and so you're part of their, like the Corey Good and Randy Kramer type program where they're creating these super soldiers, and they usually typically put about $100,000 in the development of each one of those, but they do have to be controllable. Okay, so this makes sense. Who's next in asking questions? Karen, I think it's your turn.
Oh, gosh, I'm incredibly fascinated. I was one of these recruitee throwouts myself at those same ages, about 6 or 7 years old. They were working on recruiting me. I found out I wasn't really able to be controlled also, so I had an implantation that kind of had me on lockdown. And over the course of time, and this is not uncommon, it breaks when you're in your 40s and 50s. And all it did was just flood me back into the space that I was back then. And this is far more vast than people know. I'm constantly meeting people about my age who jumped out of that, lockdown, and are making those connections to who they used to be before they incarnated, and many other things, having their memories come back. And others who came out of the programs and are telling their stories, and of course we're also knowing a lot of people who didn't make it at all, young children who were not with us anymore, sometimes killed right in front of the other children, killed in accidents, and killed because they're insubordinate or they fail a test. So there's this massive programming going on to weaponize humans. And we have our soul nature inside of us isn't always cooperating with that plan, and I have had the same feedback from non-terrestrial races saying that it's horrifying to them that we're doing this, that this is humans doing this to humans, and of course it's couched under abduction by the Greys and things like that, and I don't know how much of that's going on. I know some is. I tend to let experiencers, like you said with the spiders thing, that you get to tell that that's your experience in my book, and that's interesting to me. I believe that every experiencer gets to define if they had a pleasant experience or if they had an unpleasant experience. But it's these conversations that are so important because we need to just get over it, that there is alien species. It's not just a blank they. Why do they do this? Constantly talking to people, what's their agenda? Like it's one thing. It's not. And you're really confirming that, and I appreciate that. And a question of how long you were kind of involved in the MyLab aspect of it. Are you still involved, or when did you kind of process out of that part of your experience?
Well, the MyLab thing kind of came to a bit of a brutal close when they had me murdered. And the Srazazians stepped in and said, well, we're not having him dead. So with their effort in keeping me alive, that kind of killed the MyLab problem for the most part. As near as I can figure, the last time I dealt with them at all, with the MyLab, as far as being directly in one of their labs, in one of their experiments, if you will, would be about age 8 or 9 when a fatal epileptic seizure kind of eliminated the other problem that they had been building. I used to be epileptic, and I used to suffer a minimum of 3 grand mal a day up until age 8, somewhere between 8 and 9 when I had a fatal seizure, and I haven't had a grand mal seizure since. As a matter of fact, I haven't been on medication since I was 16.
Wow, good. That's good. So I was kind of tapered out at a 7. My parents found out some things were going on. We left and went to a different state. There was a kidnap attempt at about 8 and about 12 and 16. But generally speaking, it was always quiet on my Western Front after about those ages too. And of course knowing that, we know people have a reason. And I'm not sure what they were getting at, because I agree with you about implantation and chemical experiments, and they would have these kids with exotic DNA, accelerated DNA, and they were really wanting to shut that down. I hear what you're saying. They really want to control. If they were going to have a superpower and weaponize a human, then they definitely wanted to find out what was the control mechanism. And in my case, that was what the implant was for. And I realized it the instant it broke when I was about 45 years old. It was like a program told me what it was and said that was what that was for, was to suppress all this stuff for me, or my belief in it. Really, it was just to keep me from not accessing that, because my belief systems would not allow it. So I'm glad you're seizure free. I have family with seizure disorder, and I'm glad you're seizure free. That's great. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, the issue of them sort of, if you will, getting people out of it, or putting people, trying to program. The biggest problem that you run into is humans, on the whole, are not controllable. What people have to realize is that most of the implants, like when you take a look at the implants that the Greys use, they're doing the exact same thing, on the whole, that humans do with tigers and walruses and birds. They capture them, they knock them out, they tag them, they take a couple of blood samples, and they release them back to their natural environment as best as possible. Okay, that ultimately is what the Greys are doing. Humans have a tendency of being a whole lot more brutal. And one of the things that I have heard a lot of people talk about is how they have been, well, frankly, raped by off-worlders. Now, number one, that's physically not possible without killing them half the time. I mean, you picture a reptilian, 7.5 to 8.5 feet tall, capable of throwing somebody hard enough to crack concrete with their body. Okay, can you picture what's going to happen? This is not the act of a reptilian. Okay.
Well, I have some comments on that, but I don't know if we can say it on air here.
There's a lot of things can't be said on air, apparently. Humans are the ones that are doing that side of it. Of that. I guess about intercourse. Intercourse is possible. I mean, there are humans that have intercourse with, and there's ways of doing it, and I don't want to go into it, with like large animals, right? So we have some information on that, but I don't really want to go into that on this show too much, because I think it's kind of shall we say off color?
Be in the pornographic, off color, But okay, so you're saying, but I that's another topic. There is some evidence that is possible, especially when you go back to the Anunnaki. I've often wondered how, but there's a way, and that's another topic, and I can't go into it because it's not appropriate for this show. Okay, so back to you. Sorry for the interruption, but I just wanted to interject that.
Oh, not a problem. The thing that, like you mentioned, this issue of what is their agenda, and you're right. It depends on, number one, which race, as far as what the overall agenda is, what the individual has, because all of these individuals have a free choice. They're trained or they're born to a certain culture, certainly. But that doesn't mean there aren't deviations or aren't variations. Okay, you take a look in human culture, the same thing. You're raised to believe one thing. There are people that do not follow that path. Same thing applies with the different races. Okay, and the thing you got to remember is that most of the damage that is being done, like when you talk about any one of the races, but reptilians seem to be targeted the most, infiltrating the human political system. Okay. There's a very simple explanation where most of that thought process comes from. It comes from the 1970s. If the off-worlders wanted to take over the human race, they're not going to waste a number of years trying to alter the political system. They will simply wipe it out. Okay, it's very easy to take the human political system out of the picture by simply taking out the communication lines. Because humans are not, at this stage anymore, fully telepathic. Therefore, they rely on technology. Now, the reality is most of the off-worlders that are here to help the human race evolve, because mankind is a very valuable race. It is a very viable race, and it's already left Earth. But mankind's predisposition to war, to fighting, to conflict, and to curiosity makes them a danger to everybody if they aren't brought up to speed on what is culturally acceptable or what is, shall we say, wise. You know, you take a human, and it doesn't matter. Take a human from the outback that's never seen technology, and you put a laptop in front of them, they will start pushing buttons on it to figure out how to get it to do something. Okay. Now, that is fine if it's a laptop. But you got to understand, off-world, we have battleships, off-world, interstellar starships, whose main cannons, you can fly the Titanic down sideways.
Phew.
Now, if you end up with a human pushing a button just to see what happens, you can kill an awful lot of people. And humans do this to themselves. I mean, you take a look at the killer bee. Mankind decided to play God, figured he'd play around with genetics, and what did we end up with? Okay, he's doing the same thing over and over again with and it was stated once very, very succinctly in a movie in Jurassic Park where they literally said humans are so interested in what they can do, they seldom think of whether it's a good idea. Okay. And the biggest difference that I find between what I'm dealing with and what most abductee contactees are dealing with, most people that are taken, they come back knowing that something has to be changed, knowing that the world is in trouble and there are things that must be altered. The unfortunate part in 99% of the cases is they come back only with a glimpse of a potentially devastating future, a little bit of an idea of what they can do or what needs to be done, and no real clue as to why or how. In my case, not only did I come back with the picture of what the future could be in a negative side, but also on a positive side, got shown what needs to be done, how to do it, why to do it, and to make matters even more entertaining and more interesting from my standpoint, I got the pleasure of interacting with the consortium directly from a consulting standpoint to help them understand why humans were doing what they were doing. Okay, mankind has grown up in a really complicated way, literally being told, fear that which you do not understand, that which you fear, strive to control, that which you cannot control, strive to destroy, and that which you cannot destroy, fear. Now, this goes against everything that the interstellar races, that the off-worlders and the ancient races themselves, it goes against virtually everything they believe in. Yes, the off-worlders, the ancient races, have their own gods, their own ideas as to a higher power, but they still all believe that they can get along. Mankind has this brilliant idea, if you're a different color or you come from a different part of the planet, you're a different race, and therefore you need to be feared, you need to be eradicated. Now, the unfortunate part here is that's about as backwards as it can get, because the reality is if mankind couldn't get along, you wouldn't have countries at all. As a matter of fact, the United States, Canada, Mexico, none of them would exist. None of them would be in existence today if people couldn't get along. You wouldn't have the UN if people couldn't get along. But people have to realize that war has never been a successful way of having peace. Okay, the standing joke, if you will, and these guys don't have much in the way of a sense of humor, the standing joke amongst the consortium is that mankind talks about how good it is at war and how well they've developed their combat abilities. But if mankind has gotten so good at it, why is there a population increase? And don't get me wrong, I'm a firm believer that the military is a necessary thing. It is something that you have to learn. That does have value. Politicians are necessary for civilization to evolve. But quite frankly, when you're looking at the military, you should be looking at defense only, not at going out to pick a fight with another country. When you look at the off-worlders, if they go to move into a planet that is already occupied, okay, they make contact, they figure out a way to negotiate an interaction, and they settle in. Now, we are obviously talking about the more socially advanced ones. I mean, there are the barbarians that come in and try and, wipe a planet out, right? Or they take it by force. But mankind is a fledgling race. It is extremely young. One of the obvious giveaways is that mankind has developed so many different religions and spiritual beliefs that all talk about peace. And yet 80% of their wars are started because of religion or because of spiritual differences. Now, I don't know, but I think somebody's missing the boat on the message that's trying to be passed here. What the off-worlders are trying to do, and they tried doing it through the politicians. Now, the belief, and it's accurate, is that back in World War II, Hitler had contact with off-worlders. He did. What they don't tell you and what they don't want you to know, what the humans don't want you to know, is that virtually every other major power at the time also had contact with the off-worlders.
Okay, I have to ask you a question here. How do you know all this? That's one thing. We don't know.
And
we haven't
down there talk to them.
Your sources and how that happened. I'd like to take a short break here and then come back. It is 4 o'clock, and then we'll go into kind of a roundtable discussion. This is fascinating, by the way, fascinating, but I do want to get a little bit of background here on, what is your source. People always want to know sources. So we'll take a little break here. Let me go get something to play during the break, okay? We'll play this.
Sure.
And we'll be back in 2 minutes. everyone, and welcome back to Aquarian Radio at aquarianradio.com. And I'm your host, Jenna Lesson, with co-host Karen Christine Patrick and Reverend John Polk, and we are in the middle of a fascinating interview with Keith Andrews, and this is the Experiencers Network. And what I'd like to do in the second half, obviously, Keith, there's so much to cover with you, and sometime we're going to have to have you back to go into much greater detail, but we'll try to do as much as we can this next hour. We'll do a roundtable. What that means is whoever's speaking, please take a look at your own little clocks on your computers or your phones or your watch, whatever, and limit your response or your comments to about 4 minutes. And I'm not going to use a timer. I think we can kind of be self-disciplined and just kind of be aware of the time and then pass the ball to the next person. And we will, of course, do this again in the near future if you're willing to come back, Keith. Okay, with that being said, it's been a while since we've heard from John. I'll reserve my question until it comes around to my turn. So it'll be John and Karen, then Keith, and then back to me. Okay? So, John, take it away. Your questions or comments for Keith, or for the panel.
Okay, start with a comment and then lead into a question. So I met Keith 2 summers ago at Experiencer Speak 3, and then he attended, of course, this past year at Experiencer Speak 4, and I was the opening speaker at the VIP dinner. And one thing that I was just so compelled to do, I feel like this was some kind of divine guidance from some higher source, perhaps Yahweh, in which I wrote my book about, who in fact is Enlil from the Anunnaki. But I was compelled to conduct a seance in front of 80 experiencers. And I basically said that I can see ET, and I'm not special and I'm not unique, that we can all do it. ET, just like Keith alluded to earlier, they're always there. They're just vibrating at a different frequency, and we can't see them with the human naked eye. And I said, okay, show hands of those that can see ET. And only 4 people out of 80 rose their hand, which really surprised me. And Keith was one of them. Ron Sharfie was another one. And 2 other individuals, I just cannot for the life of me remember who they were. And I basically said that somebody during my presentation or before the end of the entire conference, somebody's never established some kind of contact will establish contact for the first time, and or somebody that lives on the other side, like Keith and I do, along with many others that were there, will establish contact unlike they ever had before. And so day 1 of the conference expires. Day 2, it's getting into the early evening. And what happens right as our last speaker, keynote speaker, Travis Walton, begins to speak, 4 visitors walked into the room. And they approached me first, and they started asking, who do we pay to get in here? And I said, well, let me go find Audrey. And they approached Audrey, and they didn't have the right amount of money. And they were like little kids with paper currency, but they didn't understand what they had in their hand. They didn't even have enough money to get in. But Audrey went ahead and let them in anyway. And it was curious that the conference was about a half an hour off schedule, and yet they showed up exactly when Travis's DVD, his new DVD entitled Travis, was just first starting to be shown. And they sat down during the whole presentation and his question and answer session after that. And then following that, they came back up to me and started talking to me again. And I don't know, within maybe 5 or 10 minutes, there was a group of people all around us. And it was one of the most incredible things in my life I'd ever experienced. And it was funny, about a month or so ago, I was talking to Keith on the phone, and I said, Keith, when I was there, somebody said, hey, I'm not trying to be rude or anything, but your skin is blue. I said, who said that? And Keith was like, I said that. And I'm like, man, they put me under some kind of alien anesthesia that I just don't exactly remember everything. So, Keith, pick it up from there. Well, I was kind of curious. You were talking to them about other ET races. That was one of my questions and my talking points. what was the other ET race that you mentioned to Don, their leader, and where were they from?
Well, the other ET race that I was talking about was a race called a Martokian. Now,
that's it, Martokians. Okay.
Yeah. And
no, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Everybody I'd spoken to earlier about that I've mentioned the race Martokian to, they just looked at me and gone, what, pray tell, is that? Right? Like, what are you talking about? Now, for the listeners' edification, Martokians, quite frankly, come from Mars. They are not little green men. They are very tall. They're normal-sized. They're human-sized green men. Okay, but they've got reverse knees. Now, when I mentioned this to Don, after as you said, I says, I did tell him, I don't mean to be rude. You're a little, you're bluish, obviously. Are you by any chance Palladium? And he looked at me in a very odd way, and he goes, yes. So I welcomed him to the conference. Told him, I said, it's great you showed up here. Of all the places to come, this is an excellent place to do it. Right? I said, most of the people here have either had or claim to have had or would like to have off-world experiences. My guess is you've had more than your fair share. So he lightened up a little, and we talked for a bit. And I mentioned, I says, just for your knowledge, if you're interested, a few years back, I ran into a Martokian. Well, he got visibly excited, and the visible excitability of him was confirmed by another witness, where Don turned around and he started asking me, where did you see him? What was he doing here? Why were they in the area? Like, clearly, Don knew who this guy was, or what this race was. So we explained how that went, and then I asked, because understand, Angela was the lady that was with me, and she actually spotted them from across the room first, and had pointed the Palladians out to me. She spotted them like most people that recognized it at all did. They were a little off color, right? And she asked me to go over and see who they were. Right, what it was with them. Well, the thing that people don't get is I asked Don if we could get a picture of him, right? And Don said, certainly, no problem. So I turned to to me, a stranger at that time at the conference, and asked if he could get a picture of Don, Ange, and I. And he did. He says, no problem, I will. Took the picture. And Ange offered to send the picture through Facebook or through email to Don, and Don got very defensive and goes, no, I don't want it released to the public. I don't want to be known in the public eye. I said, okay, then no problem. We will not release it publicly. He says, and Don says, I don't mind if you show it face to face, but I do not want it released to the public. So, okay. We won't. And the thing people have to realize is, yes, there is a bluish-colored skin of people, of humans. They have something called silver, I think it's silver iodide or something to that effect,
colloidal.
That they've got too much in the system.
Yeah, colloidal silver.
Colloidal silver. There we go. Thank you. Something you must understand. Don's pigmentation was fluid. It changed under his skin, and you could feel it move. Now, this is not something that will show up in a picture, especially not in a still. It will not show up in modern technology's photographs, because the one thing that Don told me point blank was that they are shifters. They control their pigmentation. Okay. So and what caught him off guard was the fact that he hadn't held it together quite that well. Now, the other part, and I don't know if you noticed this, John, but when they went to leave the hall, like the conference room, I watched them go, because one of the other guys that was there got really edgy, really uncomfortable, and he clearly wanted to go. So Don broke our conversation off and says, I got to go.
I remember. That I do remember. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I watched them leave the conference hall and head for the front door. They didn't make it to the front door. They did. They literally faded out. They vanished, much like, if you will, a transporter beam. Talking to another witness actually saw them show up the same way. They didn't walk in through the door. They materialized in the lobby. Okay. So, but you are right.
Yes, and I've heard of that happening at a number of conferences where off-worlders will just materialize and then dematerialize. And they often have some kind of strange face. Sometimes they're bird-like or have different colored skin or what have you. But this was so obvious. It was so obvious that these people were not from our planet. I mean, it was just something I think about every day of my life, and I can never, ever not think about it. I think about it every day.
The thing I found really fascinating about it was on our way out there, I had told Ange that she would see something while we were out there. I didn't know what, but something was going to happen to eliminate any question about what I'd been telling her about what I'd been dealing with. And like she said, the arrival of the Pleiadians kind of did that.
And then the 12 plus witnesses.
18 at this point. Actually, okay, I think 18. I've got 20.
You got 20.
Yeah, I think we've got 20 eyewitnesses inside the building that saw them. Now, that's a pretty big number for an indoor event.
Oh, yes. I think that's unprecedented.
So, I mean, and the thing is, the message that they bring is a very simple one, and humans are missing it. Quit fighting with each other, quit screwing up your own world, and quit destroying your own food. But mankind has this brilliant idea based on greed that they can do better. Now, people have asked me quite often, and I got told this very succinctly by a number of different races, the Pleiadians being one of them. The reason that the off-worlders don't come down and just fix the problem, i.e., pick somebody up and cure them of cancer. Well, they dealt with the political, with the governments of the world, and the governments broke every contract they made and tried turning everything into weapons. They turned to the corporations and found out the corporations were greedy. The corporations have the cure for cancer. The corporations have the cure for most of the autistic and neurological problems that this planet is generating for itself, that the people of this planet are creating. The corporations won't release it because, frankly, there's too much money involved. So they're now turning to the individuals. But most humans, because they only get sporadic, they only tend to hold part of the memory of the trip, don't get the full information. They can't figure out how to relay it. And, of course, the people that are sitting in governmental or in control positions, in influential positions, don't want their perfect little illusion of paradise to be destroyed. But people, they're destroying it in the first place. Okay, this is why, if you want your kid to clean up their room, you can go in and clean it up and it will end up in the same mess. If you get them to go in and clean it up, they tend not to repeat the process, although it may take 6 or 7 times to do that. This is the same problem. If you pick a human out of this cesspool that mankind is building, cure all the illnesses that they're dealing with and put them back, they're going to get sick again. In my case, I was lucky because Angela tore a strip off of one of the groups of the Swiss I deal with, and told them flat out, if you're going to keep taking him up there, would you mind repairing his arm? Well, I kid you not, they did. My arm used to be offset by a good 30 degrees. It no longer is. And that was done in a matter of weeks. So, the reality of it is the off-worlders are trying to help, but mankind has to realize the governments are not the people that control the world. Okay, the people that control the world, if you look at the numbers, take a city of 100,000. If you're lucky, you've got 400 government employees running the city. If you've got 100,000 people, trust me, the people, if they work together, if they get to know each other, if they start talking to each other and get to know who they're dealing with, the people are the ones that control the planet. And it's certainly not the off-worlders trying to screw it up. If you think about the logistics behind it, if any one of the races wanted to take over a city, they'd pound it flat at the worst from orbit. Okay, if they wanted to go a brutal way, if they wanted to go a more subtle way, sound waves can knock out every human on the planet without a problem. So we got to start looking at each other and go, there is a better way. You don't have to fight with each other. You don't have to pollute the planet. Okay.
You're right, Keith. You're right, Keith. Let's let one of the ladies chime in. Karen, Janet?
Karen's turn. Karen, go ahead.
Oh, man, it makes me want to comment about 50 different things at once, but I limited it down to a couple comments. First of all, it's fascinating our timing here because we will have an expert on colloidal silver on the 10th. Clyde Crisp is coming on with us, and I take his silver, and it's good. It's very pure. We're very careful. I don't look blue yet. But anyway, so that's going to be an interesting conversation right there. And then the other thing people should know about is there are a couple of human strains of DNA. Some families, the Fugate family from Kentucky has a genetic mutation where their family members are blue. And so that's something to note. I believe a couple of Native American cultures had blue people in their strain, and also some people from the Berbers in the Sahara, I believe it's the Sahara Desert. There's a tribe, a Bedouin tribe, that has quite bright blue people in their older generations. And, of course, it's a sort of a recessive gene, so it pops up every so often. So we have also the ancestry from India talking about, races, the blue people that were the blue gods and goddesses. So this is not an unknown thing in the ancient history and in our DNA strains. I'm not sure that's who you were seeing at that time because of the other things that were going on with technology and what John Polk was talking about, alien anesthesia. And I was the editor of his book. So I love his terms, Yahweh the biblical God is an alien. You guys got to check it out because it's got good terminology to describe, what happens to us when we get around some of these races. We have some form of anesthesia. It might even be a natural reaction to us being too exposed to something too different. So there's a lot of things racing in my head. I think the biggest thing I'm super excited about is that Janet and I are planning an experiencers conference in Albuquerque next year, and I'm going to be scanning the audience, looking for our visitors, as I think that's a natural place for them to come see us. They would probably feel more welcome in a group of experiencers than probably maybe three-letter agency people. I'm just guessing. But, I'm going to be watching the audience for that. That might be one of the ways we start having disclosure is that we have these gentle, spontaneous, friendly peer-to-peer. I call it peer-to-peer, and I think you're dead right when you say that they came to our leaders, take me to your leader, and our leaders are going to weaponize absolutely everything. And what's happened is they've given up on the leaders, and they're taking their case by the millions to the people to expose us. Exposure is disclosure. So we realize that they're kind of like us. We realize that they won't harm us. we start having those gentle interchanges and learn from each other. And it seems like a good way to go, considering we're kind of stuck in a place where the greed of, what our planet manufactures really good right now is scarcity. And I also study economics, and I study the fact that the greed eventually creates a situation where you have, a friend of mine pointed out you can't buy an apple on the I-5 corridor on the West Coast. You can buy applesauce, you can buy apple pie, you can buy, apple cider, but you can't actually buy an apple. In other words, we've got apples growing, but we don't bring them to the place where the people are, getting their gas and jotting in for that, a treat. And the thing is like a gas station on a highway is like a perfect visual of what is scarcity. They're running on fuel that's like gasoline, which is like a scarcity. That's scarcity is big profits. If you've got a whole apple orchard, you don't count apples. If you have an apple company, you're going to count the apples and make them into some other kind of form that people pay jacked up prices for. So this is all how we manage the planet is really important, and because the more you are in contact with extraterrestrial races, the more you come back and you look at Earth with new eyes, and you realize how weird it is, kind of silly, kind of like this weird place. Like if you've ever been somewhere it was very commercial, I'm thinking Disneyland, yeah, I went there. Or some places a tourist trap. Everything's there designed to separate you from your money, pretty much. Buy a souvenir, buy this,
right.
Buy that. That's how planet Earth is it's become, very commercially oriented, and that's a weird kind of illness. It's actually what they said one time was, money, how quaint. How quaint.
And that's exactly what it boils down to. It's like, what are you actually doing with this? But money is a form that humans can use for barter.
Yeah, I agree. We can also decide some other things, too. And that's some of the interesting things happening right now with people exploring Bitcoin, bartering electronically. I'm supporting the basic income guarantee to put a floor to poverty so we don't let people go all the way down and out. On the way to abundance thinking, to look at making scarcity, making a toaster that breaks in 2 years. Have us be really horrified by that. Have us really be horrified by homelessness when we have empty buildings everywhere. I mean, we've got to look at what we look like to other races. It's very illogical, not very wise, and not very humane, and not very kind. So,
no, but you got to remember the human race are infants.
Yeah, we are.
Okay. So, I mean, a 2-year-old isn't very wise or cooperative or kind to each other either when they get into a panic situation. I mean, how many 2-year-olds will grab hold of a cat and drag it around the house by the tail?
Yeah, they say they got 2-word vocabulary, mine and no. Exactly. I had 3 of them. They became teenagers all at the same time, too. So it's like three young children, then grew up to be 3 teenagers, and that was a whole different way of mine and no. But, I mean, yeah, we're adolescent, maybe at our best, and toddler-like. And actually I had when I was interacting with one of my insectoid guys through a teleprompter thing, one of the other aliens in the room just pushed through to say to me, why are the babies in charge? Because of our soul age. And it was like, why are the babies in charge? And I didn't have a good answer for that. I really didn't. I don't know what to say. So, yeah, exactly. So this is really fun.
Well, yeah, and I mean, what else do you do with that?
I just said that maybe they needed to learn something. That's all I could think of. But that's what it looks like. It looks like we have a leadership with a soul age that's adolescent or very childlike. And fascinatingly so, they indicated to me that people who incarnate with disabilities and difficulties and poverty are some of the greatest oldest souls that we have. So we have a sort of a reversal. Is that the older souls come in and hold those positions that allow us to mirror ourselves what we're like as far as poverty and disability and all those things. We have very old souls incarnated in our Down syndrome children and our poor people in the streets. It's very fascinating how we incarnate here.
Yeah, and that's
okay.
That's a whole other list of stories.
Exactly.
And it's funny, the point of money, how visitors walked in with money and they didn't even know what they had in their hands. You know, and I like to use the term when you use consciousness as a form of currency, then some paper monetary system is meaningless to them. They barter in consciousness. They don't even use, you know, a paper currency to buy and sell goods. And it was funny because I'm talking to the head ET, if you will. His name was Don, and at one point Keith was like, he did something to upset him or turn him off or something. And he and I talked about it on the phone, and what it was is that Don was asking me about my book. And I was trying to sell my book, Yahweh, the Biblical God as an Alien, to an alien. I was trying to get him to give me money. I was trying to get an alien to give me money to buy my book, but I didn't. At that point, I was under the alien anesthesia, and I didn't even realize who I was talking to. I really didn't. And then at that point, he pretty much started talking to Keith and everybody else. He pretty much stayed right next to me, but that's when right at that point, Keith was like, you did something to pee him off. I don't know exactly what you did or said. And that's what it was. You know, I was trying to sell him my book, and he just started asking me questions. What was I supposed to do? You know, I was there to try and sell my book. So I did. And I'm like, you can actually do it online right here. You can break out your credit card.
That actually makes sense there.
It does. Keith was like, what did you do? He was like, I'm not trying to offend you, but I am a psychic. You know, you did or you said something to turn him off. And I'm like, I had to think about it. And I'm like, what could I? And I'm like, I know what it was. I was trying to sell him my book. I was asking him for money. Or actually, I told him, you can do it right here over online, right here over on my Mac, right here, right now. We can sell it to you online. And then I think at that point, he started talking to Keith.
Well, knowing the way computers work myself, I have trouble with these binary things. The Palladians, they use a holographic biomagnetic flux interface. You're talking about using something. You're kind of trying to tell them to use a telegraph before the telegraph was built.
Oh, yeah, right.
But it's no wonder that would explain them being like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I was trying to get some money out of them. Trying to sell my book. But if I'd asked them for consciousness, can you send me a few streams? That they probably would have done that. But
that one they probably got a better understanding of.
Yeah, well, I was under the anesthesia, and it took a number of us, like at least 5 to 10 solid minutes for it to soak in that their skin was, and it was weird. It looked gray at one point, and it looked blue at one point. But when Keith said it, when Keith, you said it earlier, because they were shifters and their pigmentation was shifting.
That's right.
And it's funny, even Audrey Hewins thought one of the four was a female. We all saw different things. There was four of them. They were all clearly male. But
there's something you might want to understand here. From all the witnesses I've dealt with, okay, and the fact that I was there and Ange was there with me, the Don himself was definitively blue. The older gentleman, the taller gentleman, he was taller. He was slightly younger. He was basically I almost want to call him a trainee, if you will, being guided on how to deal with humans. Right.
Okay, how about that? Sure.
It would be a little hard for you to see him. He was behind you. He was the one. He had kind of a, if you will, a beige body in a sense, or a beige hoodie. Right. He's the one that got a little agitated that Dawn had said, I got to go. Right. The female, there was a female there, but she wasn't an off-worlder. She was a translator. She was, if you will.
Really?
Yeah. the blonde lady wasn't Palladian. She was a contact, if you will.
I don't even remember her.
She was
blonde lady. God, I don't even remember her. That's too strange.
She was blonde. She was a larger woman. Beige. I think it was a beigeish colored sweater. Right. And there was another gentleman there with a goatee and sunglasses. Right.
I remember him
his hair was
distinctly.
All. Yeah. The chap with the sunglasses. He was bald, and he had the goatee, but I'm curious. I don't think, quite frankly, what I saw, if he was even part Palladian, it was a mild part, because he didn't. I'm not, like, when I was looking at him, right, I didn't see the coloring quite I didn't see the coloring the same way. And the thing is,
he wasn't.
In the videos that we've got, like, we do have a couple of videos that were sent, and quite frankly, he's pink. Well, Caucasian. He's not. There were only the two that are very distinctly blue. Well, silver, blue, white. They were Palladian.
Yeah. Two of them definitely were.
Oh, yeah.
Dawn and the tall thin one.
So you're saying Pleiadians are blue?
True Pleiadians, okay, the purebreds, are roughly human sized. They are translucent blue, and they are completely bald. Okay? Hybrids are, depending, but they are a bluish skin, a bluish silver, grayish colored skin. It's fluid. Okay, the guy with the goatee, I suspect, was I guess the best way to put it was probably a hybrid to a degree, but probably not as much. It is quite probable, given his height, it's quite probable he was Nordic. Now, Nords are the tall blondes that people keep talking about. Okay, right. They're tall, they're blonde, they're usually in really good shape. Okay, so, I mean, did we have off-worlders? Yeah, clearly.
Yes, we did.
So you're saying there were several different species, several different types of off-worlders, and they might have been mixed with some humans.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
In
absolutely.
That party.
Absolutely. That I can think of, like, that I'm absolutely certain of. The Don and the one younger chap that was with him, the guy with the hoodie, okay, and the sunglasses that everybody talks about, both of them were clearly Palladian. Now, there's no question they were hybrid because, well, frankly, if they were pure Palladian, they'd stand out like a sore thumb, right? You just can't hide that kind of coloring. I suspect very strongly, and I didn't get a chance to talk to him, but I suspect very strongly the one chap was Nordic. And it's a well-known fact that the Nords and the Palladians do interact with each other. And we are talking interact on a positive level. Okay, but the blonde that was there was human. She was a contact, somebody to basically a guide to say, here's what you need to deal with. Because she's the only way they could have the money in their hand at all, because there's no way with their culture, with either the Nords or the Palladians, they could not understand the finances, and they certainly wouldn't have been using a bank machine. Okay.
No, but what's
the last thing they're going to do is try and get money out of a bank machine.
Were they dressed like they were people from local Portland, Maine? I mean, clothes.
Think about it. Where else are they going to get clothes if they're in Portland?
Yeah. I mean, they go down to the consignment shop.
Remember Star Trek remember Star Trek when they were going to take an away team and they were going to go into an indigenous culture and they didn't want to stand out. They would do research. They could look at our data banks and they could look at our internet and see what do people in Portland, Maine wear. They probably have some kind of replicator, fabricator to create costumes.
Exactly.
You know, and remember Spock always had to wear a cap because he had the ears, and so they had the hoodie, you know, to cover certain characteristics. And
right.
I mean,
it's just a little harder to cover your entire skin.
Right.
You know.
Oh, I mean, Don's fingernails were blue. I mean, down to
Absolutely.
his fingernails. Down to his fingernails. And he was wearing this real low-brimmed hat and glasses, and you had to take a look at him, you know, a few takes before it soaked in. And then, wow, when it soaked in, we were all just like, my God, we're sitting here talking extraterrestrials. And Don loved it. You could tell he just gloated in it. He fed off of our energy. And, you know, Keith, I'm sure you'll agree with me, is that they wanted to be seen, and they wanted us and others to see them. They wanted us to talk about it.
Yes.
They did.
And if you notice, Don had, like, everybody was talking about somebody with sunglasses. Don had sunglasses in his pocket. Okay, so he clearly removed them at some point. Obviously, he was wearing them at some time. And bear in mind, the lighting was a pain in the neck. The guy with the goatee also had sunglasses. Now, I didn't see myself. I didn't see the face of the blonde lady. Okay.
I didn't either. I didn't see her
I
at all.
don't know if she had sunglasses, but since she was human, it really didn't matter. The other thing you got to remember is, yes, they wanted to be seen. They also knew that most people wouldn't be able to deal with it properly. And this became painfully apparent the following morning with the reaction that the people in the hotel had with simple snakes and lizards at the show the following afternoon, where half of them were ready to go home because they were afraid of a lizard. You know.
Really? I didn't know that.
What lizard?
Yeah,
I didn't hear about a lizard. What was going on?
Oh, no. The reason you didn't hear about the lizard is because there was a reptile show the following day, but it was members of the staff that wanted to go home because they were afraid of the lizards in the show. And we're talking, you know.
Wow.
You know, so, but you are right, John. There is no question. Don wanted to be seen. They wanted to be noticed. But if you think about it, the number of people that actually saw them and yet didn't recognize them. Okay, the reality is, you know, Ange and I talked about it, and the reason she got me to go over and ask to see what was up. She spotted them before I did. Frankly, she's got better eyesight than I do. But I told her I've been dealing with these races all my life, and from her standpoint, to avoid accidentally insulting somebody or making a mistake and embarrassing them or what have you. Bearing in mind, I'd already told her I deal with them regularly. The logical thing from her standpoint was, we'll go and talk to them and see what's up with them because they look blue. You know, there's a silver blue tinge. When she first pointed them out, I didn't know. You know, I didn't spot them, so she pointed out again. She goes, the guy with the white cap. Right, the white cap, the beige cap. And so I went, oh, okay. So I went over. And it just didn't dawn on me that I should do anything else except ask, you know, like you ask when you meet somebody, where are you from? So I asked where he was from. I asked if he was from Palladium. You know.
Oh, we were all
and he said
bored.
yes.
Exactly.
Keith, what I think that we were all put on the Jedi mind trick, but I think that you were able to deal with it better than most of us, if not all of us, because of your experiences, because I know I blacked out, and so did Ron Sharfie, and so did some others.
And that I would absolutely agree
out.
with from the reports I'm getting from people. That's essentially correct. People didn't even talk to each other at the same table when they saw them.
No, I mean, I was totally under what I like to, and remember this term forever, I'm the one who coined it, alien anesthesia. They placed us, they administered it on us, and I think it was done when I shook his hand, and you shook his hand too. That's when I started to go blank, and then you got a picture of him. I was trying to, and so was Ron Sharpie, to get pictures of these guys. I mean, I'm sitting next to some aliens. I want to get pictures of them, and I forgot. I just completely froze in my tracks, and I forgot what I was even doing. And then I was going to follow them outside.
Let me ask you guys. What do you think was the purpose of their visit to the Human Experiencers Conference?
I believe,
from my standpoint, is easy. But what's your take on it, John?
I believe that this is one of the first steps to disclosure. I mean, we've been stepping towards disclosure, forever. But I think this brings us one step closer, because this is a monumental event, in my opinion, in world history, because of all of the witnesses that were there. And they wanted to be seen. They wanted to be seen at a UFO conference, which was specific to experiencers. I mean, yes, there were scientists in the crowd, but most people there were experiencers, whether they were attendees or speakers, what have you. I mean, I would say 90+% of us there were experiencers. And when I conducted that seance, the collective energy that we all created made it so much easier for them to pass through the portal, if you will, into our dimension. And that when I wrote my script, a month in advance, I believe that those thoughts were placed in my head knowing that they were going to show up, knowing that they were going to show up during Travis's presentation. And what better, and here's something else to think about, Keith. They never once made any effort to go talk to Travis. They talked to us. And I started to think, well, why? And then I had to think, well, they probably already knew Travis. They probably might have abducted him in the past. But they knew to use him as an excuse to enter, and they didn't even have enough money. I mean, the whole thing.
Here's the neat thing. Number one, no, the Palladians didn't abduct Travis. However, that being said, they did show up, and I do agree with you that they undoubtedly contacted you in a sense because they were planning on coming. I don't doubt that, but they were showing up as a test, if you will. They picked an experiencers conference because people that have been experiencers are more likely, theoretically, to be ready, to be open to it.
Sure.
So they chose it for that purpose. Now, we know. Ange and I are absolutely certain of it, that Travis was taken by Nords. Now, the thing you got to remember with the Palladians' purpose on being there, it was to find out if humans were ready for open interaction. And the sad reality of it is most are not. And the reason most are not is because most people didn't notice. First of all, they couldn't wrap their brain around it. Pardon me. Most people were visibly afraid of it when they started discussing it, even when it started pointing in that direction. However, this said, they are going to try again. They are going to make more contact. Okay, they are going to show up at more of the events. And primarily it's because experiences are at least leaning in the right direction for the most part. Okay. So it is something that will, when you, and I forget which one of you mentioned it, and pardon me for problem with names, but one of you had mentioned that you were going to watch for them at the next conference you were at. Keep your eyes open. And Karen, just in point in fact, look to the back right of the room. When you come through a door. When you come through the door at the back of the conference room, they'll be sitting over to the left. Like as you walk through the door, turn to the left. it'll be the back right if you're standing at the podium.
Mhm.
That's the alien corner.
Yeah.
That's
essentially
it's
a convenient place to go.
Yeah,
that's where they were. They were in the back left corner, pretty much. Not far from me.
Oh, man, I have to tell you that I went to a MUFON conference for New Mexico, and my partner noticed some people with bad wigs and sunglasses sitting in that corner in the audience. So I think they're crashing our conferences, and we want to make them feel... So I'm in charge of that conference in Albuquerque. In October, I'm going to make sure that we make them feel very welcome, and that we're friends, but they'll probably zap us too, but I'm going to at least try to keep myself aware and in the right frequency range.
Well, like I've told Angela and a number of people, we're actually now actively looking for different conferences to speak at because of the number of things that are happening.
Oh, great.
Right. Now, who is Angela? Is that your partner or a friend?
Yeah, she's the lady that came out with me. In all fairness, she keeps me on the straight and narrow with a lot of it, because much as I don't deal well with technology, Angela, on the other hand, let's just say, bearing in mind her background, helping me deal with PTS going through airport security is kind of necessary. You know.
Okay. So she lives. You're living you're in Canada now.
Yes.
Where do you live? You're currently
specifically. I live in Kelowna, BC.
Oh, Kelowna,
British Columbia.
Okay.
Right smack in the middle of the Okanagan Valley.
Okay.
I know where that is. I'm from Washington State. It's beautiful up there. I've been to Vancouver and Victoria a few times. It's beautiful.
Well, if you've been to Vancouver, we're about 4 hours west. Or 4 hours east, rather. West will be west.
You didn't say a boot. I didn't.
I didn't say a boot. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, cool.
Apparently, I've got a Scottish accent, though.
Scottish. So I wanted to, we have about 8 minutes, and then we're going to be running out of time. And since we're on the subject of conferences, perhaps we can share a little bit about that. I did have one thing I wanted to say, and I'm an Anunnaki historian, and I work with the Linkage Institute, and Karen and John. We all have had Anunnaki exposure as part of the extraterrestrial species in which we are in contact with. And my understanding of the Anunnaki history and intervention into the human systems, political and spiritual religious systems, and the control of the government, is that, we don't have all the information. A.R. Borden, when he went to one of his last meetings with the Anunnaki, said, we really can't judge humanity because we're just not given all the information. And in order for us to make intelligent decisions and earn the right to be a part of the Federation of Planets, which is one of the organizations that I work with intimately as a lifelong experiencer of Actual Crib, is that we need all the information. So that was part of his demise by almost demanding that, so he wasn't long on the earth, and he is no longer with us on this side of the veil, but he is communicating with some people. In fact, I never met him personally in life, but I had a connection. I had some communication with him in the etheric, quote-unquote, dream state, whatever that means, because that's
right.
a time of high contact for experiencers. I think it's too easy to dismiss those things as dreams. So I forgive humanity. I love humanity. I know we have a lot of faults, but I think that, if you look back to history and information like Sitchin, but there's other people, it's not just Sitchin, that the wars were created in service to the gods, who are the Anunnaki, who were petty and jealous and competitive. And we do have part of that because we are half of them, but the reason why they chose us for their Anunnaki human hybrid program was because we had compassion and empathy, and those things have been bred out of us by these mind control games of manipulation and control around religion and the concept of individual countries and patriotism. Those things are divide and conquer techniques that keep us in this perverted matrix and away from the sacred and divine matrix of which we are capable of seeing, and I hope in my lifetime we actually move into an axis. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say. Now, we have 5 minutes. Let's go around again, and we'll save you for last, Keith. John, what would you like to say in summation? And you have about, I don't know, a minute and a half. Go for it.
In summary, I'm just glad that we finally got Keith on the show. We've been trying really since the conference to get him on the show, and just things just didn't work out, and we had some technical problems in the past, and then just time anomalies. It didn't work out, but I believe that the stars aligned and that it was supposed to happen today, on this day, at this time, and I'm glad that we finally did it. So anyway, Keith, it was a pleasure having you on the show. I've been wanting to do this since after the conference, and I believe you had too. And I'm glad that I prefaced at least my first statement and questions about asking you about the different species that you've come in contact with. I thought that set the stage for a perfect roundtable conversation about all the different race species of extraterrestrials out there.
Well, it's definitely been interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
We're gonna end with you, Keith. So, Karen, go ahead. Your kind of closing statements, and tell Keith a little bit about our conference ideas, the cities and states, and we want to make sure we have Keith on our list and all the contact information.
Oh my gosh, Keith, stay in contact with us. We're trying to develop a We Are Disclosure conference series starting in Albuquerque. I'm from the Pacific Northwest. I'm trying to do one up in Seattle. Maybe you can come down for that. I also, please keep us posted on the investigation. This really is an investigation of a case. And you guys, please keep in touch with us and let us know if other people come forward, if you have any kind of written material or anything, because we're very interested in that. And I would love to have you come again, Keith, because you've really laid out very specifics about races, and I know a lot of our listeners have dealt with one or two or more of them, and we have to have that conversation. All of us together need to have that conversation. Hey, yeah, I saw that. I witnessed that. I've talked to that being. This is how it happens. This is how disclosure happens. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And Keith, your turn.
Well, it has been. It's been a really enjoyable show. I've really appreciated that. Am I open to coming down to a conference down there, Seattle, or for that matter, wherever else? Providing, of course, we can work out the timing for it and the transportation and what have you. I'm very open to do it. The reality is, when I travel, I bring Angela so that I don't actually end up lost on this planet. And that's easy for me. That just goes part and parcel. The other issue is, in 3 hours here, I'm going to be carrying this conversation on. I'm going on Spaced Out Radio, where we're going to carry from 10 until midnight tonight.
Cool.
And that's Pacific time.
Oh, that's cool. I'm going to be on Scott's show in January.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, Dave Scott, January 5th.
Yeah.
Spaced Out Radio. So, all right, good.
All right, wonderful. Well, it's good that we had you here, Keith. I'd like to invite you back again. I don't have your contact information, so if you could shoot me an email to aquarianradio@gmail.com, I'd appreciate that. I'm coordinating all these shows with John and Karen and a couple other hosts, and we are working on this 24/7 to get the word out, to shift the consciousness of this planet, to create this new paradigm in time for our lifetimes. I'd like to live long enough to see it. I think that would be the happy ending that we all need to have for this extreme life.
Right.
So we are out of time, but much love and blessings, and aloha to everybody who listens, and thank you, everybody. Thank you, John, Karen, and Keith. And with that,
and thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh, we'll have you back. Much love and blessings. And I got to find my exit music. Here we go. Aloha.
Bye.
Have you heard? Metro by T-Mobile now includes Amazon Prime. Yes, enjoy the best of shopping and entertainment, movies, TV shows, music, free shipping, and much more. All included for just $40 per line for 3 lines. All on the T-Mobile network. Discover the smarter way. Metro by T-Mobile. That's genius. One offer per account. Offer subject to change. $12.99 per month value. Offer valid for new Amazon Prime members. Metro customers may notice reduced speeds versus some T-Mobile customers. Video at 480p. Capable device required. See store for details and terms and conditions.